Oh, we have to talk more.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for being a part of this.
Yes, I'm excited. I love it.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. I'm so excited for this conversation. I get to introduce someone I had the privilege of working alongside during my time at the University of Utah. Beth is currently the Associate Director of the Financial Wellness Center, but titles don't quite capture what she actually does. She's one of those rare professionals who doesn't just step into a role, she expands it constantly. You know the type, always paying attention, always noticing what's missing, and then doing something about it. Beth is the person tabling at events that didn't exist before, piloting ideas that haven't been tested yet, and building initiatives not because they're easy, but because they matter. Her work in financial wellness is deeply human. It's about access, dignity, and making sure people have the tools to make informed decisions about their lives. Whether that's leading IRS-certified volunteer programs that hold themselves to the highest standards of service, even when it means asking someone to come back with the right documents, or expanding counseling access so that every member of a campus community feels seen and supported. One of the things I've always respected most about Beth is that she doesn't wait for permission to care at scale. She helped bring to life initiatives like personalized one-on-one financial counseling for university employees, making financial guidance more accessible, practical, and integrated into everyday life. And alongside all of that, she continues to invest in her own growth, recently earning her certification as a certified financial planner, which speaks not just to her expertise, but to her commitment to doing the work at the highest level. Beyond the credentials and the programs, what stands out most is her belief in the impact of this work and her ability to bring other people along with her. You see it in the volunteers she mentors, the teams she builds, and the pride she takes in collective success. Beth does more than just talk about financial well-being. She builds systems that make it possible. And I'm really grateful to have her here today. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what you do. That's super cool. Thanks for doing the thing.
Thank you. And it feels good to hear those accomplishments because we don't always take the time, and to hear someone I respect and admire so much talk about me like that feels really good.
I appreciate your work, and I appreciate that, like, one of the things that's cool about relocating is you get to, like, stay in people's orbits. And I will just, again, take the time to, like, talk about the good things about social media spaces like LinkedIn. Like, I don't have to guess what you're up to. Like, we can stay connected and still know what someone else is doing and imagine, like, what it feels like. Like, it's not just a post or a comment. It's like, oh, I know who Beth is. I know exactly what that was like. So, like, good job, Beth.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about leadership, you know, your work in financial wellness. As much as you want to talk about finances or whatever, we can, but really thinking about how you lead. And so you supervise and train student financial counselors, people who are still becoming. How do you lead in a way that builds both competence and confidence at the same time?
I have changed my leadership style so much over the years, where I used to think that a leader had to show no flaws, that we have to be perfect and on point, and we can't make mistakes and show weakness. And I'm not sure where that came from, where I had picked up that belief, but I quickly saw how that doesn't work. That doesn't build any trust with your team. People see right through that so easily. So one of the first things I do is I very quickly show people my path. I quickly let them know that I was once in their shoes, that I did not know what I was doing. I share my biggest flops and failures, my embarrassments, the times that I put my foot in my mouth with clients, or the horrible tax mistakes I made. And that vulnerability is where that trust is built.
Yeah.
And then they're more likely to come to me with those questions they have, or with the mistakes that they make. So that's the core, I think, of how I lead, is vulnerability.
And, like, I appreciate you acknowledging that, like, I don't know where this idea of what leadership was supposed to be came from, because I think a lot of us, you know, like, you step into a role or a title or a new kind of context and you're like, so this is what I'm supposed to look like or be like. And, like, and that's why these conversations matter. Like, we have to remove that expectation, because you're right, it doesn't work. There are like so many things you said that I want to talk about. And one of them is I think sometimes there is this fear that like my vulnerability is going to be used against me. And so I appreciate that you started by like, this is how I used to look at it. This is how it works and actually does work. And can you tell us a little bit about how you started that journey and like maybe how you where your vulnerability showed success? Because I think there's a gap where like I can see that this isn't working and I can see that maybe this would, but that feels really scary.
My career and my trajectory is unique, and I know we're all unique. No one's journeys look the same. My career for many years, I was on my own. I worked part-time. I was a stay-at-home parent, and I worked hybrid, or I was even at home most of the time. And I didn't have a lot of interaction with people. I didn't have a lot of oversight. I just kind of was just on my own. So I didn't have really good examples.
Mhm.
And then in my late 30s, I found myself having to go back to work full time. Well, actually, my first full time job was in my late 30s when I was divorced. And so entering the job market, first full time job,
Mhm.
I think that I know I had that imposter
Yeah.
syndrome because I didn't have those experiences of being on a team, and I felt I should know how to do this. And so I had that armor up,
Yep. Yep.
and I just was like, I just got to play this part that I know what I'm doing. And it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work. I wasn't connecting to my team. I couldn't relate to my teammates and the students I was supervising. I just was running into so many frustrations. And in my counseling sessions, when I talk to people about finances, that's when you're most vulnerable.
Yep.
You're sharing so much. And the way I relate to my clients, I am vulnerable with them to build the trust with
Yep.
them. And so once I started taking that vulnerability over in the way I was supervising and leading, then everything just cracked wide open.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, I just had that disconnect that I couldn't be vulnerable in a leadership space.
That is such a helpful example of like seeing it work in one space and then being able to be like, oh, if this is working here, this might work over here. And so I really appreciate you kind of walking through that because I do think, in an academic context, it is nearing the end of the semester. And I was listening to a student talk today about like, I was able to find a job and like that's a big deal in this current economy and environment. And hearing her kind of express like the pressure that has created on her because she knows how fortunate she is to have found a job. And so I do think that I think we absorb all this pressure, whether that is, you know, our feelings about being new to a full-time work environment or knowing how fortunate you are to have a job in an environment. Like, I think we're all internalizing pressure from somewhere. And that when we do that, there's this immediate like, okay, so I gotta really deserve this, or I gotta really show that I know how I'm doing this. And whatever we can do to help combat that, I think we have an obligation to do because to your point, it just doesn't work. And I think a recurring theme in the leadership conversation is trust. And trust is one of those things that is everyone knows when it exists and can feel when it doesn't, but it's so intangible. Like, Beth, how did you build trust with your team this week? But like, really though, Beth, how did you build trust with your team this week? Because I think we also have to demystify a little bit the idea of trust.
Yes. I love praise, and I love catching them being good.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this worked on my toddlers, and this works on on
Uh-huh.
but praising them to somebody else and making sure they overhear, those types of things. But anytime you can catch them doing the right thing. When someone I supervise, she handled a situation so well. I was really nervous I was going to have to step in, and it was something she and I have been working on for a little bit, and I was overhearing. She handled it perfectly, and I'm just beaming. I'm so excited. And so the first opportunity I got, I praised her up and down in front of somebody else who mattered, and her face just seeing that I noticed, and that was just so amazing. So those types of situations. I'm also a bit of a control freak. This has been really hard at the tax clinics because they are something I am so passionate about. They're my baby. They're my big project that I brought to campus in a different way.
Yeah.
I worked really hard. So letting go of control is really, really hard. But that's what I need to do is I
Yeah.
need to give away that control, show my team, I know you can do this. I've given you all those tools. And I'm really proud of myself because I did a lot better job this year.
Good job, Beth.
And I am patting myself on the back for that because that's growth for me.
Yeah.
And it's good for me to recognize that too, but giving them those opportunities so that they know I'm putting this in your hands and you can do it. So those types of things.
I think one of the things that you're illustrating that's so important is like trust is one of those things. And like, this is going to sound so cliche. Like, this is definitely like a country song or something. But like, the only way for trust to grow is to give it away.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot talk about trust or I cannot talk about responsibility or ownership or growth without giving the opportunity and knowing I have to be okay with whatever happens here. And like, and I think the other thing is like our team is learning from us all the time, not just in the times we're like saying, no, really, please learn from this training that you like complete this form correctly. But like in the things that we give away, we're also giving permission to give things away and know that when you give something away, you lose control a little bit of the outcome. And that's okay in the right ways for our team to see. It's important for them to see. And I think there is this, old adage of like, you want your staff to take responsibility, then you have to give them responsibility. And what happens in that exercise is trust. I am trusting you to hold this. And you can falter, and we want to communicate openly and honestly about that, timely also. But like that is a good practice that you're not going to learn if that like you, the leader, are not going to learn. They the employee is not either. It's just scary.
Yes. Yes. And I was very open with them and letting them know, hey, this is growth for me.
Yeah.
Because a year ago, this was too hard. And I was looking over everybody's shoulder and I'm double checking.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I'm praising them. And even when mistakes were made, I didn't backtrack and go, see,
Mhm.
this is why I knew I
Right.
should do this.
Right.
It was fine.
Yeah.
Everything is fixable. We can figure it
Yep.
out. And it was reassuring to me that it's going to be okay.
Yep.
I can let go. And we had such a huge success this year. We had growth this year. It was just incredible to see for myself that look what letting go and letting others step in can do. But then also my team really seeing that I do trust them and the growth that our team can have from that.
And it is like it's such a beautiful kind of joy and like pride that like it is so fun to celebrate a team that is doing well when you're less attached to it. Like there's this belief like I'm actually praising you specifically.
Yeah.
And if we do all the things that our staff do with them, we lose that opportunity to say, I saw you do this. And I know you know that this was hard for me because I was open and honest and vulnerable with you, vulnerable with you about that. But my praise means so much more because I also took the time to watch and see. And there is so much magic there that I think people are missing out on. Like we talk about the fear of being vulnerable. I don't think we talk about the magic of like when you do delegate and it goes so well.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing you said, because you said a lot of things, like that one answer that I really loved, was the opportunity to watch and praise somebody, in front of somebody that matters, that gets to hear it. And so I think what we're talking about there is presence. Like you were not absent or apart from this thing. I think we're combating a historic, like, I've been promoted to a certain point, so if I am going to delegate, like, go do the thing, I'm not going to do it. How do you balance, being a leader of significant function and people and still finding the time to be a present leader?
That was an interesting part of my role and understanding that part of my role. So as I'm preparing, as I'm looking at my time and my attention, that is built into my time and my day. So I'm not packing my day full
Yeah.
and just completely ignoring that. So making sure we have our one-on-ones regularly, making sure in my one-on-ones with my supervisor and my leaders that I'm talking about how I am mentoring and supervising. And it's not just an add-on, it's just not just an afterthought. That's a core function of what I do. And if it weren't built in, if I wasn't intentional, it would be forgotten. And this is like budgeting, okay? This is everything has to be intentional. Because if things are just an afterthought, like savings and investing, it doesn't happen because there's no residual. There's nothing left over if savings, that last part of your month,
Yeah.
if praise and taking care of the people who supervise, there's nothing left over.
Like, I'm not going to, but we could stop right there. Because, like, I think I love the framework. Like, to apply how we manage to the function of budgeting makes so much sense, because what you're saying is absolutely true. And we could acknowledge that with our savings and our investments. I'm going to use pens. My general feeling about leadership is someone applies for a job and they're like, okay, this is my job. No, that's like the function of your job. But if you're a leader of people, you have this other job. And to your point, if you don't think about both of them, if you don't leave time for this, if you don't schedule time to connect with your staff or to talk to your supervisors about how your staff are doing or how you're leading or mentoring or like professionally developing your staff, just like if you wait till the end of the month for your savings, they won't be there.
Yep.
This just goes away. And it's similar to savings, the losses compound. It's not just like, oh, I didn't invest in my staff this month. It's like, oh, now my staff, I'm not retaining my staff.
No, they're burned out. And then
Right.
we're like, why did they leave? Why did they go?
Because I did my job. Like, no, you didn't, because you had this shadow job that like even, and like obviously I was like flail these pens. Obviously job descriptions of leaders say things like lead staff, like I'm not saying those job descriptions don't acknowledge that. I'm saying that I think they're under assessing the time and the effort it takes to lead staff well, which is why we have to advocate for understanding the time we're talking about. And so a question I would ask you about that is, we have a shared friend and colleague, Brandy Lavoie, who always says, like, if it's not on my Outlook calendar, like, LOL, like, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
And so a question I would ask is, in addition to one-on-ones, do you calendar other things that are like leadership functions of your role?
One-on-ones for sure. We'll have check-ins if I'm noticing that we're getting out of sync. Yes. And then we have team check-ins. We have like an overall team and then our sub teams. And then some more informal ones. My team is small enough that can happen. One of the things that I do is monitor moods and outputs. And if I'm noticing some slipping, if I'm noticing some burnout, I'll send them home early.
Yep.
I'll say, come in a little later. I noticed you stayed a little later. So I do
Yep.
try to notice that. And I try to model good, healthy behaviors. And I'm so fortunate where I'm at in my department and where my department is, that they take that seriously.
Yeah.
And our overall health is taken seriously. So that's modeled for me as well.
And like, if anyone is listening, these are the things I would add to job descriptions of leaders. Like, you use some very active words like monitoring, modeling, noticing. Like, these are the active functions that like are never going to show up on a job description, actually. Because they like lead your people is one thing. Monitor the moods and general function and output of your team. I have never seen that on a job description. But what we're talking about there is leadership, knowing your people, being present enough to be aware, and then acknowledging the reality while also saying, I know that you were here. Like, you have to know they were here a little bit late to say, maybe come in a little bit late tomorrow morning. And I think there is this pressure. I had an employee once who was an incredibly phenomenal employee, zero critique on their performance. If anything, overperformed. And that's what we're getting to. Like, we had a huge golf tournament and I was dropping her off and she was like, I'll get back online and I'll finish these things. And I was like, I will literally cut off your access. Like, I think sometimes people are so anxious about their underperformers that we don't always talk about, what about that employee that is always willing to stay late and doesn't and needs that modeling to say it's okay to step back.
Oh yeah. We've got to take care of them because we don't want them to burn out, and we don't want an example set that that's what's expected,
Right.
because that's not going to be healthy for everybody. And we want them to be acknowledged for that hard work and know that you don't have to push and push and push. As we recover from tax season, it was also Financial Wellness Month. So the non-tax team was working on other events. You know, we're all taking some rest days to catch our breath before we get into our next busy season. Acknowledging the ebbs and flows of the work is so crucial. And like you said, it's not in a formal job description, but it is a part of the culture that we're nurturing and creating.
Well, and I think it's so important because we do take the time to talk about recruitment or retention or persistence in these roles. But I think so many of the indicators of those problems they live right here. Are the expectations overwhelming? Am I given the opportunity to, recoup my time when so many of us, at least in the higher ed or nonprofit spaces, have that like nights and weekends as needed, and you have these cycles and seasons that are like, in advancement, it's homecoming. Like, oh, I have not been home, like my clothes are not clean. Like, what makes it really hard to come to work next Monday after this is over if like I have nothing to wear? Like, just functionally, that's hard. And so I do think like there's just a humanity element to our work that I do think has to be understood.
Yes. Yeah. We have to understand our team and their needs. And we do have to understand our jobs and what's asked and required, but it can't be like that all of the time.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you for all of that. Love. Okay. So as not the math person in the conversation, what is harder to teach, the technical side of financial planning or the human side of sitting across from someone in that vulnerable moment that we already talked about?
The vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
Yes. Math and numbers can be taught. We can pull out the calculator. We can do all of that. But acknowledging the vulnerable side of why we do the things we do, whether it's in our leadership style, our work style, or our financial decisions. I think I need a psychology degree to really do my financial planning well. And I'll tell you that the financial planning field is putting more and more psychology into the planning requirements. And I'm so glad that they do. And if it's one person, I can handle it. I'll tell you what, when I do couples, if I have a couple coming in, it is a lot harder to get everybody on the same page, because it turns into a couples counseling session. And I am not trained in that. But maybe one day.
I am. Okay, there are two things you said that I want to talk about, and I'm going to do my best to remember both of them. The first one is, I think sometimes our own vulnerability is like hard, right? So like it's one thing to sit in that meeting and have that conversation with that person or that couple. How, like tangibly, how do you train or coach or like assist in the learning of that function? Like if I think of, do you have students who do this work?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a student, I'm young, I'm learning, I'm in a classroom, I'm stepping into something new or different. Like, yes, functionally, I understand tax law. Maybe I don't, but maybe they do. Um, how do you work with them to kind of grow that skill?
So that's what gets to be really fun, is we'll have students coming in who've been learning all these financial concepts, and they are ready to go, and they're ready to get in front of somebody to then pass that knowledge on. And we pump the brakes. You've got to bring in those people skills, those relating skills. And yeah, we take a lot of time to really talk about how scary that is, to come to somebody and say, I don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
Please teach me. Please share with me. So we talk a lot about creating a safe space, free of shame, free of judgment, how to be able to get somebody to open up. And, we do intakes and we try to get an idea of what the person wants to talk about, but a lot of times it doesn't capture the situation. So yeah, we do take a lot of time to do that, a lot of shadowing. We shadow them before they get put in front of a student. So a lot of time is taken.
It's fascinating because I feel like we talk a lot about bedside manner in healthcare, but I don't feel like I've ever heard anyone talk, like, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this. And yeah, if I'm going to sit down with somebody, I really want them to not say like, wow, you're terrible at this. Like, this is a fascinating, and like, I think I would even ask, like, this has to be so advantageous for the student's ongoing career.
Oh, absolutely. The local financial planning firms, they headhunt here.
Yeah.
They say, oh, you worked at Financial Wellness Center, we want you. And because of that side, what they're finding is that they'll get these planners who can create all these financial plans, but they're not relating to people.
Yeah.
And they can't have those hard conversations of, you're making a lot of money, but you're spending a lot. And if you want to increase your retirement, you're going to have to cut down on spending, because that could be a hard conversation.
Yeah.
And if you can't deliver that well, your client's not going to want to talk to you again.
This is like a whole new world. Okay, this is so fascinating, and I think it's such a huge asset. Like, huge believer in experiential learning, experience functions that exist within our collegiate experiences. But this is such a huge value to the student, to the community, to the campus, to the whole like function of this work in Salt Lake and beyond, that like, yeah, I knew it was cool, Beth. But like, this is really, really cool.
It is. And the tax clinics just build on that. And what I love about that is it's not limited to our budget and the students we can hire, because we bring in any volunteer so they can train. So we're pulling in students from accounting and anyone who wants. And what I've done and what I've expanded on is at the very end of their tax filing, because I have a captive audience, is we do a 2-minute financial counseling session where if they're getting a refund, we're just like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. And give them a little bookmark of ideas that they can do with their refund. an emergency fund, start investing, pay off debt, save up for tuition, and just plant that little seed.
Yep.
Because the key is not just the education, it's the resource too. And last year I did a follow-up, and 80% of our students who got a refund had taken a positive financial step.
That's amazing.
I know, it's so fun. And then the students who owed money, and we serve a lot of our international students who have very complex tax treaties, and I'm so grateful we're there to walk them through it. And a lot of times they'll end up owing money. We talk about why they owe money and ways to prevent that, and we're able to help them. So 1 year from now, they won't have that big tax bill. So it's such a key intervention point. And I love that this is brought to our campus community. And I love that we're serving students on both sides. So student taxpayers and the preparers are learning these skills that they're not going to learn in a classroom. And it's right here on our campus.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of it. It just brings me so much joy.
I'm obviously biased because I love the University of Utah, but I do think that one of the things that I love so much about this entire function is like, you know, I am grateful for the people who reply to my constant chatter about higher education who are like, I don't get why this matters. And like, this is such a beautiful example of like the things that happen on a campus are unique, and they ripple in ways that like we don't get to see yet all the time. We get to see how this went, and we get to advocate for the creation of programs like this and how we pull students and other volunteers in, and the way that we take that extra step of doing something more. But we also don't know what those dollars will do and what that student will do with that information and who they will impact and transform with that. I have a former colleague who was talking about a student speaker and like an experience they had at an event. And I said, like, one of the things that I love about this is like, it's cool right now, and it's going to continue to be cool. And I don't know, I'm sure plenty of people feel this way about their jobs. I just think it's more true in higher ed that like this investment that we're making serves so many people as it grows and flourishes. And like, I do want to just take this time out to thank you for your work, the way that you do your work, who you engage and involve in your work, and the way that your work has grown to serve additional people is its own function of leadership that I think also needs to be talked about.
Well, thank you. I'm really proud of it. And there was just a glaring gap in this service, especially for international students. So working to bring that and the level of service and competency that was lacking, I'm really proud of. And it was a lot of hard work, but I'm really glad that it's here. I'm really proud of it.
Can we talk about, and because I do think this is a function of leadership, is seeing a gap and saying, how can we help here? When you see a gap, can you kind of illustrate for us what happens between like, I've noticed this thing doesn't exist, and again, like high notes, because otherwise we'd be here for 8 years, which would be charming, but like probably no one would listen. How do you go from like, oh, there's a gap to like, here's how this could be solved?
Well, to be frank, I didn't at first recognize the issue with the gap. And it was pointed out to me by a former colleague, because the solution was, okay, we can help resident students file, and then international students get this code and they can file online by themselves. And at first I was like, oh, okay, well, everyone's served. And my colleague just said, do you not see the issue here? And I had to take that step back. So she was the one who opened my eyes. I'm so grateful for that perspective. But it just took asking questions and saying, well, what would it take to close this gap? And just starting to talk to other offices, recognizing that everyone is scared of taxes.
Yeah.
And getting in trouble. We did talk to general counsel to make sure. And they looked at the VITA laws and they said, nope, so long as you're going in scope of the IRS, you're all good. And then it was just tapping into resources. Higher ed is the most beautiful community in that there's no gatekeeping. Everybody loves to
Yeah.
share the resources they have. And so I just tapped into the higher ed network and said, who is doing international taxes? What are you using on your campus? And then from that point, it was just studying and learning those international laws. So
This is a super in the weeds question. But when I was at the U, we were still in the Pac-12. And that was also my experience. Like, hey, how do you structure scholarships? Like, people like, here's all the information. And so I would ask, were there specific institutions that you were like, that were particularly helpful in this process?
oh, Mizzou is
Yeah.
one. I have a really good colleague there. Shout out Alex. She and I
Love.
worked on it together. And then it's called Vita U, is a community who does Vita on their university campuses. So I tapped into them. I think University of Connecticut is one that I also tapped into. And
I
then
love that.
United Way, they also do, they're not a university, but they do a lot of tax help. So.
And I think what my endeavor to illustrate in that function is like, we need each other as people, but when we find our people in other spaces, it's easier to change the world when you don't have to start from like absolutely the first step.
Oh, it is so true. Because I started and I was trying to start and I felt so lost. And then I had that thought, I'm like, what am I doing? I know all these people. There's listservs I can ask. And then it came flooding in. So.
But I think this is another example of humility or vulnerability. Like, I don't need to spend years trying to figure out what building this from the ground up looks like. I'm comfortable enough to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Is anybody doing this well? And can you help me, please? Because the work matters. And I do think like this is one of those worldview functions of like, again, leadership. And we talk about like both functions of leadership. The other thing that wasn't on your job description was like, hey, solve this gap. And so I do think like leadership, really transformative leadership, is being willing to say, I am going to start this line of inquiry. I can ask that question and I can follow this up and I am going to do that well. And I do think in a space where I firmly believe that teams take on the characteristics of their leaders, like this is another example of showing students that like when you graduate, you are not done learning and growing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And just showing them what's possible. And when you see something that isn't working or when those gaps are there, to ask. And if you don't like the answer, you can change it. You can find a way.
And like, not to just sit here and tell you that everything you say is profound, but I do think that is the point. Like a leader's job, and like I'm going to pick like, I don't know, Washington crossing the Delaware. Like if there is a major thing, he's just like standing on the front of the boat, like he's looking, he's present, he's engaged. How are we as leaders looking out? When I think, again, if you're like, okay, I'm finally in this role, I can be the boss and whatever. There is an active obligation to say there's a gap and we need to fill it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I used to think of leadership as this loud and visible and high up in front of everyone. And it took me a while to realize that is one type of leader, but there are so many types of leaders. And sometimes leadership is just getting the work done and filling that gap. And and just sometimes it is just putting your head down and making sure it gets done at the end of the day. And that's more my leadership style. I don't love being out front and talking in front of everyone, but we need leaders of all types. And I'm happy to call myself a leader in that way, where a few years ago I wouldn't have been. I
Yeah.
would have been like, oh my gosh, stop. I'm not, ew, gross. I'm not a leader. That's not me. But recognizing these different types of leadership styles and leadership roles in our lives, and we don't need to have the big titles, the big offices, all of those things. But what are the things we can do in those spaces around us, in the communities around us, and the people watching?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think one of the things that Marianne Villarreal said when I was still at the U that I always appreciated was, maybe it was Dan Cairo. So either way, whoever it was, talking about imposter syndrome, not in like not just in a, I'm not sure I can do this, but in a, I haven't seen someone who looks like me or does this like me do it. And I do think like that is where I want to pause and applaud the significance of letting people call you a leader and feeling comfortable with that. Because if leadership is just this one size fits all, confident, boisterous, front man kind of vibe, there's a whole lot of people sitting there saying that's not me.
right. Oh, I like that. I didn't even think about, I just was thinking about me. But yeah, that's such a good way of thinking about it. Someone being able to look at me and like, oh wait, someone coming into the workforce later in their life and they're able to make this difference. Oh, I like that.
Well, it's so important. And I do think in a world where we all want to, I shouldn't say we all want to, in a world where oftentimes we're trying to figure out how to find our path. One of the beautiful things about diversification of a workforce should be that number should go down. Like imposter syndrome, if we're talking about not recognizing or seeing ourselves in a space, is something that should decline by merit of a diversified leadership workforce. And so I do think it's important to like acknowledge that and say, oh, I met somebody who is hardworking and not the first one to jump up on a stage and grab a microphone, and she's doing it, so I can too. And I think just the encouragement that is to people and students and whoever, just to see this is not a one size fits all function. I don't have to put something on to feel like I can be here. And somebody I talked to last week was talking about feeling a little bit like, ooh, I am not sure I'm doing my job well. Like 6 months in, reflecting on like, I don't think maybe I'm not the right person for this. And somebody asked her, they said, draw out who you think the person is who should have your job. And this person's name is Jill. And into the illustration, she was like, oh, because I'm not a man. Like it is this beard and this leather patch jacket and this worn bag, but the person holding and having all of those things is a man. And so like, oh, this actually isn't about me. This is about the fact that no one as cheerful or effervescent as I has held this role. I'm like, oh, so I'm not failing. I'm just me. And like, I want to live in a world where people believe that they can lead like them.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes, being that person that we wish we would have seen or wish we would have had when we were coming up, or the leaders we wish we would have had. And that's something that's pushed me so much here at work. And then I'm getting my private practice going, having a divorce and starting my life over financially. Having a woman to talk to who's gone through these things, because a lot of women are giving away their financial power to their spouse, and then when they have to start over, they don't know a lot. So being able to talk to a woman about how to start their life over, it's incredible. And I love being able to help them step into their power. And I had the knowledge because of my education and background, so I love being able to be there for them.
So let's talk about the private practice. So like, tell me a little bit about how you were like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this.
So I have been teaching and being in the personal finance teaching space. That was my part-time job since I graduated from my master's program here at the U. it was the perfect part-time job because I graduated with my master's, got married, and started having babies. And I loved being home with my babies. And everything was great until my marriage ended and it was time to get a full-time job. And I was very fortunate in how I started over, and I had a very good cushion. But it was, even with all of my knowledge, it was still really difficult to start over. And so I decided to take the leap. I had done all of the coursework for financial planning back in my undergrad and master's, but it's really expensive to keep the certification. So I never went for it. And so when I started here full time, I was like, I'm going to go for it. But that, I had done the coursework 20 years ago. So I said, I'm going to retake the coursework because I get the half tuition. It was great. So
good job.
Yeah, enjoy those perks. So I retook all the coursework and studied and passed the exam, and got my certification done. And so just in my spare time, when I can, I'm just helping women. I'll take anybody, but it's becoming women. I'm just talking with them, helping them with those transition phases. And it's not just divorce, but it's just those vulnerable times. And I'm happy to share my story with them. But re-entering the workforce, usually similar to my stories. But it's incredible for them to have a safe space to talk about what they want out of life, what they want their next chapters to look like. And I'm really grateful I can be there for them, because in the financial planning field, it's very male dominated. And it just is working really well to be able to have that safe space for them.
That is really, really cool and makes complete sense. And again, like, sometimes I feel like, what weaponized you? Like, learning at what age women could get credit cards, or like at what year in American reality, like financial freedom and independence for women was something that was viable. And so of course, like, and this is like the function of like the imposter syndrome function isn't fake. It's because we literally were not in spaces. These spaces were not built for us. They were not built for us to utilize or for us to even lead. And so, like, it's pretty trailblazer stuff, Beth. That's really, really cool.
Well, and sometimes it's still happening where there's, delineation of roles in traditional or in different gender marriages, and women aren't learning about their financial lives. And so if they do and leave a marriage, they don't know what's been going on in their finances. And so they might truly be starting over from a place, and they don't have a lot of knowledge of their situation they're currently in, and they don't know where to begin.
Yeah. So this is definitely a more tangible question about finances than about leadership, but functionally, if someone is preparing to join a partnership or a marriage, what advice would you give about how to ensure that they, no matter the gender, are staying aware? Because I also think, like, back to like fun things, I'm the business major in my family. And so like that is also a new function of like just where that education sits. So what advice would you give to people to help make sure that they're both staying in the know or aware of the situation?
Yes. Well, you have to do the uncomfortable thing and talk about
wild start.
the least romantic thing that you could think of. So you definitely need to be on the same page with finances. And I don't have the answer of combining finances or not. That is definitely up to the couple. There's really not a right or wrong. I think you can be successful either way. But you do need to talk and understand your finances as a couple. But if you're having one spouse stay home and take care of the family, that needs to be acknowledged as labor and work. And so if you have one working spouse and you're contributing to their retirement through an IRA, you can also do a spousal IRA. And then if you're contributing to the spouse through the employer, then understanding that something needs to be done for that other spouse, because if something were to happen, that spouse who's staying home is giving up not just the career earnings, but the career growth that could be happening. It's a really big investment. And so acknowledging it and finding a way to protect them through a prenuptial agreement, whatever it might be, is very wise to do for either spouse.
Incredibly tangible, super practical. Thank you for that. We are almost at time. I have one more question.
Okay.
This is me trying to pick one more question because I have like a million more questions, but I'm trying to pick one. What do you do? Oh, I like this one. Okay, what do you do when you don't have the answer, but people are looking to you for guidance? And I think that can go in any realm because you do a lot of things.
Yeah. Take a breath, take a beat, take a breath. And then it is so okay. And it builds trust to acknowledge that I don't have that answer. And I can find it though, or we can find it together. I use that with my children. I use that with my clients. I use that with my students. I like to model that. I love to model that because when I have a tax preparer who doesn't know the answer and tries to just put something in there, it causes a big mess. There's nothing wrong with not knowing the answer. And whether it's a I'll know later or maybe we won't figure it out, I don't know, but it's and I see that as a strength to admit we don't know everything. And I think this comes with age. I don't think younger people can I don't know. That's just a theory I have, but the older I get, the more comfortable I get being able to say I don't know.
You said something very like a small thing, very similar to this at the beginning, and I'm glad that we kind of came back here because I do think this comes back to like who you think you're supposed to be as a leader versus like what is actually helpful and like trying to not be vulnerable and have all the answers and look really polished and put together all the time versus like the realities of our job. And I feel like I remember in one of my early roles feeling like, integrity means not doing anything wrong. Integrity means acknowledging very quickly when you know you've done something wrong. And, want to know a person I don't trust? Someone who has all the answers. Because that's just that does not line up with my lived experience in any way that I can like wrap my head around. And so I do think like my hope is that it's not an age thing. My hope is that it is a frequency of conversation thing. That
Oh,
the more we talk about the fact that everyone you're talking to has not had the answer to something before and that is incredibly plausible and wholly believable, but you sitting here and kind of panicking and maybe Googling something like, this is how it works. Like no one's convinced by that. That is not a real thing.
I like that. Because isn't that how we learn though? Is being open and talking. I like that. Okay, I changed my answer.
I think the world is changing every minute of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that has probably always been true. I would just argue that the rate of speed at which that is true now is kind of staggering. And that if I have to show up into every meeting with the answer, I am going to fail all the time. Yeah. But if I can readjust and reorient my perspective on saying, ooh, that is a really good question. Mm-hmm. I have some experience in this space, but my colleague Beth is the best at this. Let me just ping her real quick. Like at that point, like, ooh, look, we have a team of people who care about there's actually no lose in that reality. And I do think we have to just talk about because I do think to your point, it has been age and experience. But I think age and experience plus vulnerability equals more open communication about this earlier.
Oh, yes.
And if we can help our students understand faster that nobody expects you to know, that's okay. Maybe we'll get farther faster, and that would be ideal.
Oh, I like that. Curiosity is my favorite trait in people. Yeah. Openness, curiosity, and those are the people who don't act like they know everything. They're like, oh, tell me more. Oh, that's my favorite.
And I I would imagine that in a lot of spaces, I just say legal, healthcare, finance, you're working with people who like you can only really help if they're being honest.
Yes.
And so I'm sure that that's true in other spaces, but I think of those three off the bat and saying, I would imagine in a world where we're talking about bedside manner across these spaces, that our ability to be curious probably supports curiosity on the other side of the table or the bed or the desk or whatever, because I cannot treat you well legally if you are not telling me what's really going on, or medically if you're lying to me about your daily realities. And financially, I can only help you with the information you give me.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a good point. And we've got to be vulnerable to build that trust so that they'll tell us that truth so that we can get somewhere with them.
Because the point is help. And like I think that is the other like subtext in this whole conversation. Like I think every stigma that requires every industry or field that requires vulnerability, there is a little bit of a stigma like, how much money are you going to make off of me? Or like, how are you going to take advantage of the vulnerabilities I'm sharing? And the best way to ensure that someone knows that that's not the situation is to be vulnerable with them first. And so I think that's such a good point on just the importance of being a vulnerable person.
Yeah.
Beth, this was profoundly insightful.
I loved this, Bethany. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking the time. This was so helpful. I would like to know, just so it is in the recording, if faculty, staff, students have financial questions, where do you point them?
financialwellness.utah.edu. And you can book appointments. Faculty, staff, alumni, students can all book.
And if somebody's looking for your personal venture, where do they find you?
livebigwithbeth.com.
Love it. Okay. All right. You're wonderful. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was great to see your face.
You too. We miss you here, but love your adventures.
Thanks. I'm looking at your leaves and your mountains and having all kinds of feelings about them. So enjoy that, and I'll go enjoy the prairie, and it will be great.
Yes. I hope spring finds you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.